This is a story about dignity, after life quietly takes back what it once gave. It's about discovering who you are when success no longer stands beside you. The award sat on the kitchen table longer than it should have. Timothy noticed that before he noticed anything else. The house was still. Too still for a morning like this. Outside, Minneapolis was wrapped in pale winter light, the kind that made even familiar streets feel distant. Snow rested against the windows like it was listening. He stood there in his socks, coffee growing cold in his hands, staring at his name engraved in clean, confident letters. 61 years old. A lifetime of night shifts, quiet rooms, steady hands. Recognition had finally come, and yet something felt wrong. Not fear, not pride, something thinner, more fragile. The kind of feeling you get when you hold something valuable and suddenly become aware of how easily it could slip. Timothy touched the edge of the plaque with his thumb, as if checking whether it was real. He'd imagined this moment for years. Not the applause, not the ceremony, but the quiet morning after. The part where it was supposed to settle into him, become peace. Didn't. Behind him, the floor creaked softly. Anna moved through the hallway without turning on the lights. She always moved that way in the mornings, careful, considerate, as if the day itself could be startled awake. "You didn't sleep," she said, not accusing, just noticing. He nodded. He hadn't. Sleep had felt unnecessary, almost inappropriate. On the counter, his phone buzzed. Once, then again. He didn't reach for it. For decades, that sound had meant urgency. Someone else's pain. Someone else's crisis. He trained himself to respond without hesitation. But now the vibration felt different. Heavier, like a question he wasn't ready to answer. Anna followed his gaze. "You're allowed to rest," she said gently. For once. Timothy smiled, but it didn't hold. Rest felt undeserved, temporary. The days after that morning blurred together without changing much at all. The phone still rang. The calendar still showed appointments. People still used his name the same way they always had. And yet something underneath it all had shifted. He found himself double-checking things he had trusted for months. Reading emails twice. Pausing before answering simple questions. Not because he didn't know the answers, but because the confidence behind them felt thinner than it had the week before. At night, lying beside Anna, he stared at the ceiling longer than usual. The room was quiet, familiar, safe, and still his chest stayed tight, as if he were waiting for something to fall. "You okay?" she asked once softly, not turning her head. "I think so," he said. It wasn't a lie. It also wasn't the truth. Success had arrived late in his life, so late that part of him still didn't fully believe it belonged to him. The promotion, the recognition, the sense that his years of steady, invisible work had finally been seen. He had told himself it was solid, earned, real. But now, every small interruption felt louder than it should have. A delayed reply, a meeting pushed back, a look he couldn't quite read. None of it meant anything on its own, and yet his body reacted as if it did. He remembered how it had been before success came. The long shifts, the quiet drive home, the way no one ever asked how he was handling things. He had survived that version of life by lowering his expectations and raising his patience. By telling himself that doing the work well was enough, even if nothing ever came of it. Success had lifted that weight, but it had also changed the balance. Now there was something to lose. At work, he moved carefully, too carefully, saying less than usual, watching reactions, measuring his words. The younger nurses still treated him with respect, but he noticed how easily attention shifted in rooms like that, how quickly people adapted to new centers of gravity. No one had done anything. The loss did not announce itself. It arrived quietly the way real things often do. A conversation that felt shorter than it should have been. A change in tone that no one explained. Decisions framed as necessary, temporary, out of our hands. Words that sounded reasonable until they settled into his chest and stayed there. Timothy listened, nodded, asked careful questions, and walked out of the office with the strange sensation that something essential had already been decided long before he entered the room. By the time he reached the parking lot, the truth was no longer forming. It had already landed. The role that had carried his name, the stability he had finally allowed himself to trust, the quiet relief he had felt coming home each night, gone. Not taken with anger, not stripped with accusation, just removed. He sat in the car for a long time without turning the key. His hands rested on the steering wheel the way they always had, steady and practiced, but the meaning behind the gesture felt hollow. So this is how it ends, he thought. Not with noise, with absence. At home, Anna noticed before he said anything. Not because he told her, but because he moved differently. Slower, more contained, as if he were afraid that one wrong step might make the rest of the day collapse. They sat at the kitchen table again, the same place where they had once celebrated quietly, almost apologetically. He explained what had happened, plainly, without bitterness. When he finished, he waited for the emotions to arrive. Anger, panic, grief, something sharp enough to define the moment. Instead, there was only a deep, heavy stillness. Anna reached across the table and took his hand. "We'll be okay," she said. The words were familiar, honest, real, and somehow they hurt more than comforted him. That night he couldn't sleep. His mind moved backward instead of forward. The days did not get easier, but they became clearer. Without the structure that had defined him, time stretched in uncomfortable ways. Mornings arrived without urgency. Afternoons drifted. He found himself standing in rooms with no clear reason to be there, hands idle, mind restless. This was the space where bitterness could have grown. He felt it hovering, not sharp, not loud, just present. A quiet temptation to replay conversations, to assign blame, to tell himself that none of it had been fair. Some nights that voice almost won. But then there were other moments, small ones. A former colleague calling to ask for advice, not because of a title, but because they trusted him. A neighbor asking him to look in on an elderly parent. A nurse from another department stopping him in the hallway just to say, "I learned a lot watching how you worked." None of it came with applause. None of it changed the reality of what he had lost. And yet, each moment landed somewhere deeper than the loss itself. One afternoon, he sat with Anna on the back steps, the cold Minnesota air pressing gently against their coats. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. "I don't feel important anymore," he said finally, surprising himself with how easily the words came. Anna didn't rush to answer. "You never were," she said, not unkindly. "Not like that." He looked at her. "You were necessary," she continued. "That hasn't changed." The distinction settled slowly. Necessary, not admired, not elevated, but needed. Later that week, he volunteered to pick up a few shifts where they were short-staffed. No title attached. No recognition promised. Just work that mattered to someone in the moment. The first patient he helped that day barely noticed him. The second thanked him quietly. The third held his hand for a moment longer than necessary, eyes tired, grateful without words. Something in Timothy steadied. He realized then that the loss had stripped away the proof, not the purpose. At home, Sam watched him more closely now. Winter eased its grip slowly that year. The snow thinned, the light changed. Days stretched just enough to remind people that time, no matter how heavy it feels, keeps moving. So did Timothy. He didn't return to the version of life he had lost. That door stayed closed, not dramatically, not cruelly, just firmly enough to make its answer clear. What opened instead was quieter. He found a place where his experience mattered more than his position, where his calm presence did more good than any title ever had. People listened when he spoke, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Respect returned. Not loudly. Tua. At home, the balance settled into something steady. Anna's hand still found his in the evenings, Sam carried himself with a little more awareness now, watching what resilience looked like when it wasn't celebrated. Marshall slept in his usual spots, unaware that anything important had ever changed. One afternoon, Timothy stood at the kitchen window, watching light move across the yard. He wore the same worn jacket, the same calm expression. He thought about success, how it had arrived late, how it had left early, and how none of it had taken away what truly defined him. He hadn't been made strong by winning. He had been revealed by losing. The applause had faded. The work remained. And in that quiet, grounded space, where nothing needed proving, he finally felt at peace.